The release of 43-year-old Kenneth Allen McDuff shocked the people of Central Texas.
The general reaction was, how on earth could this man get out? This is the broomstick killer. And if anyone should be executed, it should be him.
It had been more than 2 decades, but many recalled all too well the horrific crimes of Kenneth McDuff. August 6, 1966. 20-year-old Kenneth McDuff was headed to Fort Worth. McDuff had a new friend along for the ride, an 18-year-old named Roy Dale Green.
Roy Dale was a weakling who was not very bright and who was really impressed with Kenneth McDuff.
During their night on the town, Green didn't seem bothered by the plans McDuff was making.
McDuff had been talking about picking up girls and violence, and he talked about rape. Roy Dale Green just never took it seriously.
Around 10 p.m., the two men drove into the small town of Everman, south of Fort Worth. McDuff found a baseball field where 3 teenagers were parked in a car. 16-year-old Edna Louise Sullivan, her boyfriend, 17-year-old Robert Brand, and Robert's 15-year-old cousin, Mark Dunham. According to Roy Dale Green, McDuff stopped his car, pulled out a Colt .38 revolver, got out, and walked up to the teens.
McDuff took his pistol and went up and ordered them out of the car and put all 3 of them in the trunk of their car.
Green followed in McDuff's car as his new friend drove the teen sedan to an isolated area.
McDuff ultimately opened the trunk, took the girl out, put her in his car, and just shot those poor boys.
They begged for their lives, and he just shot them, and it was just cold-blooded murder.
McDuff was impatient, and when he could not close the trunk of the teen's car with their bodies inside, he backed it up to a fence, leaving the trunk open. Then he and Green got into McDuff's car and drove away, with Louise Sullivan locked in the trunk.
They drove around, finally found the proper place for him to commit his acts on this poor Louise Sullivan, and he raped her.
McDuff raped the girl using an old broomstick he had in his car. Finally, he used the broomstick to kill her.
McDuff laid her down on her back and sat on her chest and took that broomstick and held it down over her throat and pressed and pressed and pressed with it until she finally gasped and died.
McDuff and Green dumped Sullivan's body in some tall grass, then headed home. The boys' bodies were found the next day in the trunk of their car. When the news got out, Roy Dale Green broke down.
Green had a conscience, and he got to feeling real bad, and he told somebody what had happened.
Green led police to the body of Louise Sullivan. McDuff was quickly arrested. Green, his accomplice, was the star witness against him at his murder trial. On the stand, Green seemed terrified to be in the same room with McDuff.
His voice would drop to an inaudible level. The jury could tell he was telling the truth. There's no way he could be rehearsed on the way he was testifying.
McDuff took the stand in his own defense.
He acted like he could care less. He said he didn't kill him, that it was all Green's doing, and he just had cold, cold eyes.
But it's heartbreaking to sit there and listen to him when he was on the witness stand, just nonchalant. I mean, like he wasn't nothing to him, you know.
The jury didn't believe the 20-year-old McDuff. In November 1966, they found him guilty. The judge sentenced him to die in the electric chair. He became known as the Broomstick Killer. During the 6 years after the murders, the condemned killer managed to win 2 stays of execution. Then, in 1972, he got lucky as did everyone facing the death penalty in the U.S.
The Supreme Court overturned the death penalty. That meant that everyone on death row, including Kenneth McDuff's sentence, were commuted to life.
Dallas investigative reporter Robert Riggs tracked attempts by McDuff and other convicts to make parole.
They were eligible for parole, but who would imagine somebody would give it to them?
McDuff kept at it and got lucky again. In 1987, a federal court ruled that Texas prisons were so overcrowded they violated the civil rights of inmates. The court set limits on prison populations. As a result, county jails became overcrowded with a backlog of inmates. So a deal was quietly struck between Texas Governor Bill Clements and members of the parole board.
And that pact was that in order to relieve prison overcrowding, you're going to turn loose 150 inmates a day. They went through the con artist, eventually worked their way up to the car thieves, but suddenly they had run out of bodies. They found themselves in the dregs of the prison system.
The parole board reached Kenneth McDuff in October 1989 and set him free.
I was absolutely flabbergasted when I heard they'd parole that man, because I knew that he wasn't going to quit. I knew he wasn't going to quit.
In October 1989, convicted killer Kenneth Allen McDuff was paroled. His release alarmed the people of Central Texas, and law enforcement officers like brothers Mike and Parnell McNamara, both deputy U.S. Marshals in Waco. When McDuff was set free, the two men were deluged with calls.
We had people tell us that they had their windows barred, their doors bolted shut, people that had not carried guns before carried guns.
They were scared to death. After he paroled out, he returned to the Rosebud area and was right there in the middle of those people.
Rosebud, Texas, a small town near Waco, is where Kenneth McDuff grew up. Longtime residents Wanda Fisher and Glenn Stock still remember the young bully who became the broomstick killer.
He was a loner. If Kenneth could push you or knew he could push you, he'll push you to the limits. But if he knew he couldn't get by with nothing, he wouldn't mess with you.
Young Kenneth McDuff apparently was most influenced by his domineering mother, Addie, known around town as the pistol-packing mama.
Mrs. McDuff carried the reputation of being a bad person. She did carry a gun. That was always said, that she always had a gun with her in her purse.
At home, Addie McDuff lavished praise on her son and, by all accounts, protected him, even when he got in trouble. By his late teens, McDuff had been arrested and served time for a number of burglaries, a rap sheet he dismissed as trivial in an interview years later with author Gary Laverne.
When I spoke to Kenneth about this string of burglaries that took place when he was around 18 or 19 years old, he just laughed and he said, "Oh, they was just pranks."
By 1966, those pranks had escalated to a triple homicide. When McDuff was paroled in 1989, few Rosebud residents believed he was reformed.
No one wanted Kenneth McDuff to come back to Rosebud. We knew that he would be trouble.
As expected, in July 1990, there was trouble.
McDuff was a rabid racist. One evening in Rosebud, while he's on Main Street, some young black kids were walking by and he called them names and racial slurs and pulled a knife out on them, which should have sent him back to prison forever.
McDuff was sent back to prison for the threat, but because of the chronic overcrowding problem in Texas, he was out on the streets after only a few months.
It made no difference if you violated your parole, if you violated probation, anything, or if you really committed a serious crime, you weren't going to do much time.
Following his re-release, McDuff appeared ready to make a change. In early 1991, he enrolled at Texas State Technical College in Waco and got a job.
According to McDuff, he wanted to make money legitimately. At least that's what he told me when I interviewed him. And that took the form of getting a job as a cashier at a convenience store called the Quick Pack.
McDuff quit after a month. By the summer of 1991, he was back to his old ways, hanging around a part of Waco called The Cut. It's best known for its seedy bars, drug dealers, and prostitutes.
He bought and sold drugs and engaged in behavior that should have sent him back to prison because they were violations of his parole.
But his overworked parole officer did not send him back to prison. Kenneth McDuff slipped through the cracks. Left unsupervised, McDuff demonstrated a monstrous appetite for beer, crack cocaine, and violent sex.
McDuff was a sexual sadist. He got his thrills from causing pain and causing terror. Women were less than human to him. They were something to be used and used up, as he said.
He was very brutal to them, and the ones that did get away from him literally escaped with their life because a lot of them didn't.
One who didn't was a prostitute named Brenda Thompson. McDuff was stopped at a routine roadblock late one night in October 1991. When an officer approached his pickup truck, he saw a woman screaming and kicking the windshield as if she was trying to escape. To the officer, it looked like her hands were bound.
McDuff crashed through the roadblock. They did give chase, and but he was able to get away at that time, and that's the last time that Brenda Thompson was seen.
Just days later, another prostitute named Regina Moore vanished from the streets.
She was last seen in the car with Kenneth McDuff. So that was two people right there that had just vanished that were last seen in his company.
Yet the Waco police did not pursue McDuff.
They really never, from what I understand, fully checked him out. So he was always in the grasp of police who, through really lousy police work, always let him go on to another victim.
Sunday, December 29th, 1991. McDuff was on the move again, this time headed south to Austin in a tan Thunderbird. At his side was a new friend, Alva Hank Worley. Also out that night was a 28-year-old Austin woman named Colleen Reed.
Colleen Reed was a lovely, bright accountant, a woman who was beloved